You're watching Newsfeed. Well, let's continue the conversation around the issues around managing our personal finances. The advisory partner and wealth management specialist at Citadel, at the asset management company there, Kerry King, is urging South Africans to be more careful with their personal finances. King says the greatest risk that families and businesses will face this year is the possibility of an inflation-fueled global recession affecting the local economy. Well, Kerry King joining us now to speak more on this. Kerry, good morning to you, and thank you for your time. It's an ominous warning that you have put out there. Let's start with the possibility of a global recession. How close are we, or is it something that already is in the offing?
No, I think we are. It's looking more likely than it was previously. As we've seen over the whole of last year, the interest rates have increased quite considerably, and fueled with that has also been the inflation increase. So a lot of people have found there's quite a tight squeeze on liquidity. That obviously is also going to affect the economy and how the spending goes. So yes, I think that there is likely, but I think we are at about 50 to 60% likelihood of that happening.
Yeah, and talk us through then what kind of changes we could make in our personal lives in order to try and absorb this pain.
It's very difficult to absorb all the pain, but what we have to always understand is that this is a long-term game. Your personal finances is not a short-term game. It is a long-term game. And I guess to start off with is that make sure that you do have a solid financial plan that you can stick to, and that is reasonable. So yes, we are going to have short-term liquidity crunches, and I have in the article that you were referring to, I have mentioned that it is a good idea to try, as you start earning, to accumulate between 3 and 6 months worth of liquidity that just caters for your expenses. And if you can do that, then it means that when you get to a liquidity crunch, you've got a little bit of funds to be able to fall back on. But also, it means that you don't panic. So the worst thing you can do when you are looking at your finances is to panic, because then you land up making bad decisions.
And then as we deal, Kerry, with this slow grind back to the inflation targeting band, a lot of people are going to struggle with this, particularly those that are already over indebted. What's your advice to those people? What is it that they can cut back on, or is it possibly debt review?
So my first point would be to cut back. And so you say what to cut back on. You have to take a real hard line and look at your budgeting. They often say that your investments are made one coffee at a time. And it's all about that. Do I need a cappuccino every day? Do I need to be spending 40 Rand every day on a cappuccino? Maybe you don't. Maybe there's better places that you could be spending your money. So yes, it's not going to be easy, and it's not easy for any of us to take a hard line and cut back. But actually, that's what is required. And if you can instill those sort of disciplines now, and actually I think it's good lessons for all of our children that we teach them, that actually it's a good idea to be able to live off less. We don't need to be living extravagantly. We need to be living with as little as we can. And go from there. With regards to debt, there's long-term debt and short-term debt. What I would guard against is please try not to use short-term debt to fund short-term expenses. Debt to cover living expenses is very, very difficult to repay and get yourself out of that hole.
Yeah. We're winding this down, Kerry. There is another potential risk apart from the global economic recession. South Africa potentially could be grey-listed. We know that last year, October, the Financial Action Task Force would have met or would have evaluated South Africa. In February, that's next month, they are now going to have what is called a plenary, and that's where they are going to decide whether or not to place South Africa on this grey list. What would being placed on the grey list as a country mean for the affordability of credit for consumers like you and I?
Well, the value, the debt, what we could borrow, what the government can borrow money at will actually go up considerably. And I have to tell you that it doesn't matter, and what the banks borrow money at, and all of that. And that's where it starts. I'm afraid that knock-on just comes down the line because they don't have the ability to absorb the difference in the value, in that cost of debt. So I'm afraid that is going to be the case. But we do know that South Africa is working very hard to make sure that we don't fall into that grey listing. I am holding fingers and toes. I'm not convinced that it's not going to happen, but we are crossing fingers and toes that they can make that, even just postpone it a little bit longer.
Yeah. Well, let's conclude the conversation then. You've already told us that you've got to stick to that long-term plan. If you don't have one, you better draw it up as soon as you can. There are those of us who are going to see ourselves as perhaps a bit lucky. Maybe there was a windfall here and there, and they will be looking to take on new debt. Is that advisable in this situation?
You've got to look at your affordability and also look at everybody's personal situation is so different. So there are still people that will be buying cars, who will be buying houses. Everybody's situation is different. What I can tell you is that we've had a lovely upswing in the markets in the last couple of months, and I do hope that that continues. So I do think that that would be a nice place to house some of those funds anyway. But so I'm never against debt. Debt is needed in certain circumstances, but do be wary about overcommitting yourself. Remember that as we've seen interest rates go up, there are a lot of people who took on debt, but as interest rates have increased, have put more and more pressure on themselves. Just make sure that if you are going into debt now, that you still have the ability, if there are a couple of more interest rate increases, to afford the debt that you're going into.
Kerry King, let's leave the conversation there. She is with Citadel Asset Management, giving us some sage advice there on how to handle our personal finances in this very, very unpredictable economic space.